I'm not really familiar with the case. Who is the opposing party for hearsay objection? Who will we represent?
Your Honor, for the plaintiff, the opposing party in today's case will be Ms. Taylor Hobson.
And for defense?
And Your Honor, for the defense, the opposing party will be Shannon Shahid.
Wait, are you pre-trial?
Alright, so with all that, I think we can get started. Any pre-trial matters from either plaintiff or defense?
Yes, Your Honor. First, would you like the plaintiff to make appearances before the court?
Yes.
Good morning, Your Honor. My name is Jonathan Sveranian, and today I'm joined by my co-counsel, Aja Nocha, and Trish DeCalisi.
Good morning, Your Honor.
And we will be representing Ms. Shannon Shahid in today's case against the defendant, Ms. Taylor Hobson. Additionally, Your Honor, at this time, the plaintiff has prepared a gender pronouns form to tender. May we approach it?
Of course.
Your Honor, would you like the plaintiff to continue with their pretrial matters, or would you like the defense to make appearances?
What are the defense experiences?
Yes, Your Honor.
Good morning, Your Honor. My name is Anne Shahid, and along with my co-counsel, Madison Fitzgerald.
Good morning, Your Honor.
And Marisol Torres,
Good morning, Your Honor.
we represent the defendant, Taylor Hobson, in today's matter.
Good morning, Your Honor.
Taylor Hobson is our party representative.
Yes, Your Honor. There are two things in the bench book we provided I would like to bring to your attention. First, under the stipulations tab, would be stipulation 6, which says that there are a handful of exhibits, including exhibits 6 and exhibits 37, that have been pre-admitted into today's trial. We would also like to bring to your attention, under the case law tab, the case State v. Sinclair, which would be in the authentication section. Which states that lay witnesses are allowed to provide their testimony when it comes to authenticating handwriting and who may have written something. With that, Your Honor, the plaintiff has no further pretrial matters.
Any pretrial matters from the defense?
Yes, Your Honor. After a sustained objection, would you like us to move to strike or assume stricken?
Assume stricken.
And Your Honor, we'd also like to bring you back to that light green stipulations tab. We'd like to specifically point out stipulation number 7. Stipulation number 7 just points out a handful of exhibits that are waived hearsay objections, and we will point those out to Your Honor when it is necessary. In addition, we have already tendered a character evidence form, and so at this time, defense is ready to proceed.
Opening.
Your Honor, members of the jury, my esteemed colleagues, may it please the court. It's all about a change in will. Let's set the scene. On April 25th, 2024, Midlands millionaire Avery Bancroft passed away due to intentional poisoning by rodenticide, rat poison. Now, who would do this? Why would they do this? Now, the plaintiff is asking you today to find the defendant liable under the Slayer statute. Now, what does this mean? Well, this simply means that it is our job to prove to you that by a preponderance of the evidence, that is more likely than not, that the defendant was a culpable actor in the death of her father. This means that if we prove to you that by a 51% chance the defendant knowingly, purposefully, or in some way caused the death of her father, well, you gotta find her liable. Now, why would the defendant kill her father? Well, you'll hear today that the defendant was set to inherit 95% of her inheritance, and that just a few weeks, because of a change in will, that 95% was going to become 0. Now, in meeting our burden here today, the plaintiff will be calling for 3 key witnesses. First, you will hear from Ms. Jordan Nathanson, an experienced PI on board the train. She will tell us about how she heard Bancroft loudly declaring his plans to change his will. She will also tell us about threats that Bancroft had received, causing him to fear for his very life. And when given the advice that these threats were likely sent from someone close to him, well, Bancroft was not surprised. Next, you will hear from Ms. Kirby Doolittle, Bancroft's assistant. She will tell us about arguments between Bancroft and the defendant. She will also tell us about financial audits that Bancroft had ordered. Audits specifically pertaining to how much money Bancroft spent on the defendant. And once the defendant heard about these audits, well, she grew nervous. She will also tell us about how if Bancroft removed the defendant from the will, he said that he would do it by hand. Now, finally, you're going to be hearing from Ms. Rory Shelton, who will tell you about a will that did. Ms. Rory Shelton was an observant passenger on board this train, and she found a handwritten will just near Bancroft's body, mere moments after he passed away. She will tell you about this same will found on Bancroft's desk the day before, and this same will that the defendant had inquired about. Now, today evokes a lot of strong emotions from all of those involved in the case. But for the late Avery Bancroft, this was the culmination of his very life. And what did it look like? Ceaseless arguments with his own child about money, an increased concern for his own safety, and a last desperate attempt to change his will. And yet at that last critical moment, he died. Taylor Hobson became $235 million richer. That is why, at the end of today's proceedings, my co-counsel, Jonathan Superintendent, will come before you and will explain to you that when Avery Bancroft made changes to his last will and testament, he unintentionally changed one other will. The defendant's will to kill. We are confident that you will find Hobson life. Thank you.
Thank you. Ben?
Yes, Your Honor. May I proceed?
Yes.
The plaintiff just came up here and told you an interesting story. They told you about Avery Bancroft, multimillionaire and business owner of Bancroft Estates. They told you a story about Taylor Hobson, daughter of Avery Bancroft, painting her as this mastermind manipulator behind the death of her father, Mr. Bancroft. But members of the jury, this is just a story. And more importantly, this is about what the plaintiff has chosen to tell you and what they deliberately left out. So let's take a step back and fill in some of the gaps that the plaintiff left behind. And that starts with the plaintiff themselves, Shannon Shahid. Shannon Shahid, who made a promise and a plan, all to make a profit. You see, Shannon Shahid had run into a bit of a problem. As you'll hear in court today, Shannon Shahid ran a psychic business, a business that was failing, and fast. Well, so she asked her father, Avery Bancroft, for money. Again, and again, and again, and again, and again, until finally Mr. Bancroft, he said no. And you'll hear about this conversation at a family dinner where Kelly Driscoll testified about, in an argument about money. Shannon Shahid said to Mr. Bancroft, next time spare the invite. The only event of yours I'll ever go to is your funeral. Members of the jury, these weren't just angry words said in the heat of the moment. No, this was disdain. This was resentment. This was a promise. Well, because Shannon Shahid needed that money. And if her father wasn't going to give it to her, well, she needed a way to get it signed. What she needed was a plan.
so she made one. You see, in the event of Avery Bancroft's death, there were two people set to inherit hundreds of millions of dollars. Taylor Hobson and Shannon Sheehy. So the plan was simple. Get rid of Avery Bancroft and inherit his money. Well, Avery Bancroft, he was all the way in Australia, and Shannon Sheehy, she was back in the Midlands area. Well, luckily for Shannon Sheehy, she wouldn't even have to set foot in Australia, because she had a friend who had a ticket on the very same train, in the very same section, with the cabin right next door to Avery Bancroft, Ashley Connell. Ashley Connell, who was being sued for $1 billion by Avery Bancroft. And you'll hear the communication and calls and texts in court today between Shannon Sheehy and Ashley Connell throughout the train ride. But members of the jury, Shannon Sheehy didn't just stop there. You see, she was set to inherit money, but only 5%. And 5%, that was only enough to barely break even with the debt from her psychic business. And why barely break even when you could turn a profit? So today in court, Shannon Sheehy is suing Taylor Hobson under the Slayer statute for $404 million. And if they win, they get that full inheritance. And just to be clear, members of the jury, this is the only way Shannon Sheehy gets the full inheritance. And that's what this is really about. That's why the plaintiff is here today, for that money. But the defendant, Taylor Hobson, well, she's here to find the truth. The truth about the tragic loss of her father, her last remaining parent. Taylor Hobson, who now sits before you an orphan in court today, and dealing with the grief that brings. But members of the jury, you can stop this. Because it's the plaintiff today who holds the burden of proof. And it's the plaintiff today who, through a preponderance of the evidence, or more likely than not, has to prove that Taylor Hobson was involved in the death of her father. But they won't be able to do that. And we, the defense, well, we didn't have a burden. We didn't need to bring a single piece of evidence, but we did. And all that evidence will prove to you today one thing, and one thing alone. That Shannon Sheehy had made a promise, she made a plan, all to make a profit. Thank you.
Yes, Your Honor. The first instance, the plaintiff would like to call as effective court name. Good morning. Could you please introduce yourself to the court?
Good morning, my name is Detective Jordan Nathanson.
Could you describe your educational background?
I have a BS in Biochemistry and Psychology from Bowling Green State University. I also have a master's degree in biochemistry from Michigan State.
What do you do for a living, Ms. Nathanson?
I run my own company, Nathanson Investigations. It gives me more leeway in choosing my cases as compared to my previous job.
What was your previous job?
I used to work for the FBI in the BAU, Behavioral Analysis Unit, where I dealt with cases on almost everything: murder, larceny, terrorism.
So, how are you involved in today's case, Ms. Nathanson?
Well, I was already in Australia wrapping up a case when I got a call from a former client, Mr. J.C. Longstreet. He got me on the Mid-Riverina Express to meet him.
And what day did you board the express?
Monday, April 22nd, 2024.
What do you do once you boarded this express?
Well, just like anyone else, I began to unpack my room once I got my cabin assignment, cabin 8. And this is when I met the person I was sharing my cabin with, Kirby Doolittle.
What did you do once you got settled?
Once I got settled, I decided to go to the welcome dinner.
Did you know anyone at this dinner?
I did. I met a few familiar faces: Avery Bancroft, Taylor Hobson, Kelly Deuce, but I only knew them by reputation.
Did you interact with any of these people, Detective Nathanson?
I mostly
Objection to attorney testifying. The witness has laid no foundation to them being a detective.
Sorry, could you repeat what you just said?
Sorry, what was the question again?
Did you interact with any of these people?
I interacted with Kelly Deuce and Taylor Hobson.
And you've already testified that you are a private investigator, or?
Yes.
shadow my foundation going forward.
Yes, John.
That's my question.
I'll review my question. Did you interact with Taylor Hobson, Kelly Hughes, or Avery Bancroft for this agency?
I mostly interacted with Kelly Deuce and Taylor Hobson.
How did those interactions go?
Well, Deuce was asking me a lot of questions about my job and what got criminals caught. At one point, I mentioned my background in biochemistry and the cases I've dealt with poison. And when I said that, Taylor Hobson turned nervous. They went pale.
Did you do anything else that day that they could maybe see?
Well, no.
So let's move on to the next day. What did you do on the 23rd?
On the 23rd, in the morning, most people went on the excursion to Silver City. That afternoon, I also went to the Southern Australian Museum tour, along with 5 other passengers.
What happened during this tour?
It was a standard walking tour. I remember our tour guide, Mr. Spong, was in conversation with A.B. Bancroft. It was here when I heard Bancroft loudly state that they were planning on changing there.
What happened after the story?
After this tour, I returned back to my cabin to get to some work. I had a massive headache, so I asked someone on board if I could find any medicine, and they told me to check the storage room.
What did you see when you entered the storage room?
When I entered the storage room, I saw Taylor Hobson rummaging through the shelves. It looked like they were looking for something.
Do you know what they were searching for?
I do not know, but I asked them if they needed help finding anything, and they told me that they were actually just leaving and would come back later to get what they needed.
What happened next day?
Well, I went back to my cabin to get some work done.
Did you do anything else this day?
I did go to the dinner that night.
What happened during this dinner?
At this dinner, I believe I was talking with Taylor Hobson. It was a short dinner.
So, let's move on to the next day, Detective Nathanson, the 24th. What happened this day?
This day I decided to stay on board during the short stop at Mill Arbor Plain, along with Avery Bancroft, Taylor Hobson, and Rory Shelton.
Did anything happen when you stayed on board?
While I was on board, I overheard a disagreement between Hobson and his father, A.B. Bancroft. I was walking away, and that's when A.B. Bancroft called me over.
What happened next?
A.B. Bancroft was worried. They showed me a note made out of cutout magazine letters and wanted me to hire me to figure out who it could have been.
Your Honor, at this time, let the record reflect that now approaching opposing counsel and the witness in turn, what has previously been marked as Exhibit 37. Would Your Honor like a courtesy copy? Ms. Nicholson, what is it I just handed you?
This looks like the letter that A.B. Bancroft showed me.
Has it been changed or altered in any way?
No.
Your Honor, at this time, the plaintiff would like to note that per stipulation 6, Exhibit 37 has been transmitted into evidence. Detective Nathanson, what were you able to tell about this note?
Well, I wasn't able to do a full analysis of it, so I told Bancroft what I had seen in my past cases. Notes like these are made to conceal a culprit's handwriting, so it's likely that whoever...
Objection to improperly witness opinion.
Elaborate, counsel?
The witness is giving an opinion on who wrote this note and how it was created, and for what reasons it was created. The witness is not an expert, and that would be an expert opinion.
Response, counsel?
Your Honor, if I could direct your attention to the case law, specifically Jeffries v. Polk County Police Department. This states that witnesses who have law enforcement experience are allowed to provide opinions based on their specialized knowledge from those fields. My witness is simply testifying based on specialized knowledge. Now, from the experience she had in the FBI with their own investigation firm that was established at the beginning of this examination.
Response times?
Your Honor, Jeffries v. Polk says that they can use specialized knowledge. If I can read aloud, it says that they can use it based on their specialized skills, training, and experience, specifically the officer's general training, skills, and experience as a law enforcement officer. That does not mean that they can give an opinion as if that there is a reason that the note was written, but they cannot say for certain that the note was written and for why it was written.
And could you repeat your testimony, Ms. McKay?
Sure. I said that I just told Bancroft what I had seen in my past, and that was that notes like these are written to conceal a culprit's handwriting.
I am going to overrule the objection, but, Ms. Dickinson, I would advise you not to, speculate beyond the scope of your knowledge as to the identity of who might have written the note, for what purpose this expressed note was written. You can generalize based on the scope of your particular experience, for nothing further. Thank you.
Okay, now I'll repeat my question. What did you tell Mr. Bancroft after he handed you this?
Well, like I said, I wasn't able to do a full analysis, so I told him what I had seen in my past, and that was that notes like these are made to conceal the culprit's handwriting. It was most likely, like I said in my past, that it could have been someone close to Bancroft because they would have recognized the handwriting instantly.
Your Honor, on those grounds, I'd like to re-raise the objection on the second part of that statement, that it could have been someone close to him.
Are you raising based on speculation? Are you pursuing a specific rule number or the case law?
I will be referencing the case law again, that this is an improper lay witness opinion.
Okay.
If I can redirect your attention to the case law once more. It says that they can use the officer's general training, skills, and experience as law enforcement, and when it provides an example, it says whether the officer followed standard protocol in collecting evidence. Jeffries v. Polk is telling us that they can lay an opinion to how evidence is collected, how it's examined, but they cannot give an opinion on who wrote a note or how it was written.
I'm going to agree with that. I'll sustain the objection.
Yes,
Please
Your Honor.
move on.
Did you say anything else to Mr. Bancroft during that conversation?
Well, I did give him some advice. I told him that in most cases, it's those closest to you that are the most likely perpetrators.
Your Honor, I re-raise the objection, move to strike that statement. That's what we just discussed.
I'll sustain. Okay.
He said, how did Mr. Bancroft react to the advice you gave him?
Well, their face turned grim, but they didn't seem too surprised. They just nodded.
Ms. Higginson, you can put that note aside now. What happened next, Ms. Higginson, on the 25th?
I decided to go back to my cabin to get some work done, and then I went to dinner.
What happened during this dinner, Ms. Higginson?
During this dinner, I saw Taylor Hobson drinking some coffee, and they asked the bartender, Fritch, to prepare 2 cups of tea.
What did you do next, Ms. Higginson?
Well, I found it odd why Taylor Hobson would need coffee this late. When I asked them that, they said they had a long night ahead of them.
Now, Ms. Higginson, did you do anything else that night?
Well, after I was talking with Hobson, somebody offered me a drink. Afterwards, I felt really tired, so I decided to go to bed. It felt similar to when I had been sleeping pilled in my FBI training in the past.
Ms. Higginson, I'd like to move on to the next day, the 25th. What happened this day?
I woke up at 6 a.m. to the news that A.B. Bancroft had died.
How did you react to this?
Well, I was very surprised, but my detective instincts kicked in and I decided to start examining the scene under supervision.
What did you see when you got to the scene?
Well, one thing did stand out to me. I did notice some marks on Bancroft's neck.
What were you able to tell about these marks specifically?
Well, due to my past experience, I could tell that these marks were similar to as if someone had yanked something off the neck, like a necklace or medallion.
Do you do anything else that day, this detective agency?
Well, I asked the people in that cabin if they had seen anything like a necklace or medallion.
And how did they respond?
Some of them were silent, some of them said no. But I recall Taylor Hobson snapped at me and said, "Why do you want to know?"
Do you do anything else while you're on board with detective agency?
Well, once the police arrived on board and I figured I had did enough tagging along, I let them handle the investigation. I then went to Taylor Hobson's room to offer my condolences.
Detective agency, did you see anything in Miss Hobson's room?
I do remember many magazines in Taylor Hobson's trash can. I found it weird that they would take the Mid Riverina Express's magazines and throw them out instead of putting them back in the lounge for other passengers to read.
And at this time, let the record reflect, I now approaching opposing counsel to what is previously marked as Exhibit A. Would you honor with the courtesy copy?
I'm gonna object on lack of foundation. We've heard no foundation laid out when the witness saw this or how they know this document.
Your Honor, if I may. We're about to go into line of questioning, laying that foundation. Additionally, I would ask that the defense hold their objections until we're moving this exhibit into evidence.
Your Honor, if I may.
Yeah.
I ask that the witness see the document after they've laid the foundation for how they know this document.
I agree. Do maybe one or two questions of foundation laying, and then you can dive into the content of the document. But I just need to know what I'm looking at first.
Yes, Your Honor. Did you see anything else related to this case between when we got off of the New York Express and today?
Yes, I did. I was contacted a little while after by another passenger, Rory Shelton.
And what document was it that Rory Shelton shared with you?
Rory Shelton shared with me a scan of a document. It seemed to be Bancroft's will, so I just told them to hand it over to the proper authorities.
Your Honor, at this time, I'm approaching the witness with the exhibit. Detective Nathanson, what is it I just handed you?
This looks like the same will that Rory Shelton had showed me.
Any changes or alterations in these?
No.
Your Honor, at this time, the plaintiff would like to move exhibit A into evidence.
Any further objections?
Objecting on lack of authentication. The witness doesn't know who wrote this, how it was written, and has laid no foundation to how they know whose handwriting this is in.
If I may, the witness has just received the document. Now we'll ask some questions about how they can tell who wrote this document. Prior to this, if they did not have the document in hand, it would be unreasonable to expect them to memorize the handwriting.
Yeah, opposing counsel has not indicated for what purposes they're going to be using this, so counsel, you can pursue that on cross-examination, and if lack of foundation or other issues come up, you can object when they occur.
In that case, will the document then be moved into evidence?
Yes,
Is what you're
but you can also cross-examine on it.
Yes, Your Honor.
Detective Nathanson, what can you tell us about this document?
Well, I see that the handwriting looks similar to Avery Bancroft's. It also says Avery Bancroft's name at the top, so I would say this belongs to Avery Bancroft.
Objection to lack of foundation. We've heard no foundation laid for how the witness knows anything about what Avery Bancroft's handwriting looks like.
Your Honor, if I may. They were on the Mid Riverina Express with Avery Bancroft the entire time. They'd spoken earlier about how they interacted with them and seen them discussing plans to change their will and had specific conversations with Avery Bancroft. It can be reasonably assumed that the witness had seen Avery Bancroft's handwriting and could thus attempt to authenticate this.
Your Honor, may I? In that case, the foundation needs to be laid for that.
Did you testify to a specific instance in which you saw Avery Bancroft writing something or saw a piece of handwriting?
I I have seen Avery Bancroft writing down something during our meeting.
Did you testify to that prior to this line of questioning?
No, I didn't.
Then objection sustained. Counsel, please lay foundation.
Senator Nathanson, have you ever seen Avery Bancroft's handwriting before?
I have seen Avery Bancroft's handwriting. When we met, I saw them writing down something, and then they left shortly after.
Detective Nathanson, based on that, what can you tell us about this?
I can tell you that this handwriting looks similar to Avery Bancroft's, and because Bancroft's name is also on the document, I would say that this document belongs to Avery Bancroft.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Explanation?
Yes, Your Honor. Good morning, Ms. Nathanson.
Good morning.
I want to get one thing clear. You repeatedly referred to yourself as a detective in your testimony today, correct?
That is correct.
But you wrote an affidavit before coming here,
That is correct.
and you were given 24 hours to make any changes to it, correct?
That is correct.
And you would recognize it if I brought it forward to you today?
Yes, I would recognize my affidavit.
Permission to approach the witness with their deposition, sorry. Can the honor have the first one, please? I'll be referring to this first page. Ms. Nathanson, this is your deposition? It says your name at the beginning, right, Ms. Nathanson?
Yes,
And this is your deposition.
yes,
And if you turn to the back, the last page, that's your signature, correct?
yes,
Now I want you to read silently as I read aloud. You were asked what you did for a living, and you said you were a private investigator. Is that correct?
I said I have an office of private investigators, yes.
And then you were asked about your professional background, and you said before becoming an investigator, you worked at the FBI.
Yes,
But you never mentioned being a detective, working for the police, is that correct?
Your Honor, at this time, I'd like to object to hearsay. I believe an improper impeachment. I believe opposing counsel are using out of the court statements for the truth of the matter, although no direct contradiction has been shown between my witnesses' prior testimony and what the opposing counsel is presenting.
Your Honor, the witness repeatedly called herself a detective in today's trial. Not only did she not lay any foundation to it, in her deposition, she clearly did not say that she was a detective, which is relevant information in today's trial.
Your Honor, if I may. I believe they refer to them as a private investigator because that is their current position. However, colloquially, these two words are synonyms. Additionally, for that reason, there is no direct contradiction between my witness' former testimony and the points being brought by the defense attorney.
Your Honor, if I may. A private investigator and detective are not the same thing. A private investigator, you get a license. A detective, you go through years of police work and work your way up to a detective rank. This is entirely relevant in today's case because they're trying to use private investigator Nathanson to come to conclusions about what happened on the train. A detective would be highly relevant to their educational background and job history. And I have on a good faith basis, that the witness and opposing counsel referred to Ms. Nathanson as a detective throughout their testimony today.
First, the plaintiff is not offering any evidence regarding Ms. Nathanson's investigation into this case, nor any work as a detective that she may, or as a detective or private investigator that she may have performed for today's case. Additionally, we laid foundation at the very beginning of our examination about Ms. Nathanson's experience with the FBI and the training she had undergone in order to receive that position. We do not believe that the semantics of whether or not Ms. Higginson prefers to refer to herself as a detective or a private investigator have any bearing on the relevant facts of today's case, especially because we, the plaintiff, are not providing any testimony or evidence regarding what she may have done with their position as an investigator or detective.
Your Honor, if opposing counsel doesn't care, if opposing counsel thinks that detective and private investigator are synonyms, then I don't see why they're objecting to me impeaching them on being a detective, because then it should be excluded from today's trial.
I do believe that the distinction, as you mentioned, counsel, is important, and it is relevant to today's case. And the witness has referred to themselves, counsel has referred to the witness as a detective, but is relying heavily on the investigative background. The witness can testify to whatever background and specialized knowledge they may have, but I'm going to allow the impeachment to go forward based on the semantics of the title, because I do believe it carries weight in the plaintiff's case in chief.
Yes, Your Honor.
I'm just gonna ask you again. In the entirety of your deposition, nowhere did you say that you had detective training or were a detective.
Well, I did mention I work for the FBI, and under the FBI, I am required to go through training.
Ms. Nathanson, that wasn't the question. In the entirety of your deposition, did you ever say you were a detective or went through the steps to becoming a detective?
I did not mention the steps of becoming a detective in my deposition because it was not relevant to what I was testifying to.
It's a yes or no question, Ms. Nathanson.
Sorry, could you repeat the question?
I'll take the deposition. Permission to request the exhibit. Or. Now I want to talk about something you mentioned on direct examination. You said you went to the South Australian Museum,
That is true.
and Avery Bancroft was talking loudly. Is that right?
That is true.
Now, you were able to overhear the conversation.
That is true.
And there were other people in that group as well, right?
That is true.
Taylor Hobson wasn't one of them.
Taylor Hobson was there.
Is it your sworn testimony today that Taylor Hobson was at the South Australian Museum?
Oh, no. Taylor Hobson was not at the South Australian Museum.
Ashley Connell was with you.
That is true. Ashley Connell was there.
And then you overheard Mr. Bancroft say something about changing the will, right?
That is true.
And then Ashley Connell, she walked away and took a phone call, isn't that right?
I believe so, yes.
Now I want to get something else clear for the court. You did not conduct an official investigation today.
I did not conduct an official investigation today.
But the Australian authorities, they did.
They conducted an official investigation, yes.
Ms. Nathanson, did the Australian authorities arrest Taylor Hobson?
I'm not aware
Taylor Hobson's sitting right in front of you, isn't that right?
yet.
They didn't arrest her, did they?
I do not know if they arrested her and let her go.
Okay. Now, you claimed on direct examination you saw magazines in Taylor's room. Is that correct?
That is true.
Did you tell the Australian authorities you saw those?
I told them after.
And they still didn't arrest Taylor Hobson, did they?
Well, I do not know if they arrested Taylor Hobson.
Right. Now, when you saw the magazines, did you take a photo?
I did not take a photo.
Did you go over and dust for fingerprints?
I was not conducting an official investigation, so I did not do that.
So, let's just be clear. You didn't bring any evidence with you today, right?
Well, no, I did not.
The only evidence you brought was your testimony.
That is true.
The testimony that you're being paid for, isn't that right?
I am being paid a small fee, yes.
You're being paid $250,000, isn't that right?
It is normal in my line of work to charge a fee to testify. I'm charging a 0.1% contingency fee.
Yes, so $250,000.
A .1 contingency fee.
It's a yes or no question.
A .1 contingency fee, yes.
And you were hired by the plaintiff in today's case.
Shannon Shahid, yes.
So the way a contingency fee works, you only get the money if the plaintiff wins, right?
That is correct.
So if your testimony helps the plaintiff win, you get to walk away with $250,000.
If the plaintiff wins, I get my money. If they don't, I don't.
Right? Because if she loses, you don't get a single cent.
If she loses, I do not get my 0.1% contingency fee. That is correct.
But lucky for you, Ms. Nathanson, you don't mind making up evidence, do you?
I have never made up evidence.
Your Honor, at this time, I'd like permission to approach the witness with what has been pre-marked as Exhibit 2. For the record reflects, I am approaching the counsel. You're referring to the one that we should the last one. Would Your Honor like a courtesy copy? You're referring to the one slide under surveillance. Ms. Nathanson, this is your report, advertising Nathanson Investigations, right?
Yes,
Nathanson Investigations, your company, yes?
that is true.
And you give this to all of your potential clients?
That is true.
You even post it on your website,
That is true. It's my company.
right? And you yourself wrote this.
Yes, I take pride in making this and putting everything together.
Every single word.
Yes,
Now I want you to read silently as I read on. It's the last section under surveillance. If there's dirt to be
Objection, Your
found,
Honor. As per hearsay, I believe the opposing counsel is attempting to elicit outside of court statements for the truth of the matter.
Your Honor, I'm using this as an inconsistent prior statement, which would be an exception to hearsay. The witness already testified that they don't make up evidence, and what I'm going to read from this brochure that they advertise to all their clients is that they advertise that they do.
Your Honor, we believe that this is not inconsistent prior testimony. Ms. Nathanson testified that they personally do not make up evidence. When they're advertising their detective agency, they're attempting to gain clients, and we believe that there's no statement opposing counsel can read that will contradict what they previously said.
Your Honor, if I may. Under the rule for an inconsistent prior statement, it says that the witness is able to explain and respond to the evidence that is, the inconsistent evidence that is brought upon them. I ask that the witness is able to give that explanation.
What's the specific line that you're referring to?
It'll be that last line under surveillance.
Okay. And you're using this to prove the credibility of the witness, so therefore you're asserting for the truth?
No, Your Honor. I just asked the witness, do you make up evidence? She told me. I'm using this as an inconsistent prior statement, as this clearly says that she advertises that she does.
Your Honor, if I may. Can I get a rule number for the rule you're referring to? I don't think I see it in the rule.
What? Under. No, what is it? A moment of the court's indulgence, Your Honor. Your Honor, rule number will be 613. If I may, under section B, an extrinsic evidence of a prior inconsistent statement. It says, it's admissible only if the witness is given an opportunity to explain or deny the statement, and an adverse party is given the opportunity to examine the witness about it. I'm giving the witness an opportunity to explain, and if the opposing counsel so chooses to ask them about it, they can on redirect.
I am gonna overrule the objection if you are allowed to examine the witness's credibility, but tread carefully, especially on character, characters, and just feel free to read the objections as you find them relevant.
Yes, sir.
So just read silently a second. If there's dirt to be found, and even if there isn't, we'll find it. Did I read that correct?
That's correct.
Permission to retrieve the exhibit from the witness?
At this time, the plaintiff would like to object as per relevance. We have provided no evidence coming from Detective Nathanson in today's case, nor have we provided any testimony about any investigation they may have conducted. We do not see how Detective Nathanson's advertisement in a brochure makes any facts of this case any more or less true.
I'm gonna overrule the plaintiff's defense's eastern cross-examination, they're allowed to test the credibility of the witness in the bar evidence pretty well.
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, sir. Permission to retrieve the exhibit. Now, I just want to make that clear. That brochure, you advertise it to all of your possible clients,
That is true.
including the plaintiff, Shannon Shahid, correct?
Shannon Shahid is a regular client of mine.
And you advertised that to her, correct?
Yes, I did.
And you have quite a personal relationship with Ms. Shahid, don't you?
No, I did not.
Would you recognize an email written between you and Ms. Shahid?
Yes.
Permission to approach the witness with what has been pre-marked as Exhibit 27. For the record, unfortunately, Your Honor. Ms. Nathanson, this is the email that your client wrote to you, correct? It says Jordan Nathanson at the top and Shannon Shahid right under it, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
To and from, correct?
Yes.
Okay. At this time, has it been changed or altered in any way?
No.
At this time, the defense moves to enter Exhibit 27 into evidence.
Oh,
No.
sorry, objection.
No objection at this time, Your Honor.
So right at the top, she addresses you, my dear friend Jordan. Is that correct?
She talks like that, yes.
And then we might as well keep reading. You tell her, Shannon Shahid told you, I'm sorry, if you can make the April 22nd departure from Sydney, I'd be happy to buy you a ticket. Is that correct? Miss Nathanson?
Yes.
But then she goes on to say, I'll admit, I have a bit of an ulterior motive. My birth father has been in Australia, and I just found out he's going on that train. Right?
That is true.
And then she says, I don't know what's going to happen here, but I sense that somehow my half-sibling is involved. Is that right?
Shannon Shahid is superstitious like that.
Is that what the note says?
Yes.
Ms. Nathanson? This was written on February 3rd, 2024. Is that correct?
That's what it says, yes.
So 2 months before anyone got on the train, the plaintiff told you Taylor was going to be involved with her father's death. Isn't that right?
That is not true.
They said that their half-sibling is going to be involved. Correct?
Yes, but I don't see what they refer to as involved in.
It says my half-sibling is going to be involved 2 months before anyone boarded the train. Correct?
Yes, but I do not see any reference of the death of Bancroft in here.
Right. Okay. No further questions, Ms. Nathanson. With permission to retrieve the exhibit.
Briefly, Your Honor. Ms. McKinson, what brought you on board the River Express?
I had a case from Mr. J.C. Longstreet. He offered to pay for my trip on the Mid-River Internet Express to meet him.
Did you ever interact with Ms. Shannon Shahid prior to boarding the Express? Immediately.
No, I did not interact with Shannon Shahid immediately before. In fact, I completely forgot about her email.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Any thoughts?
No, Your Honor.
Step down, take 25 minutes for the witness to call.
Can you go back to call 33 the stand, please?
I'm curious, do you remember when all losses come in?
Yeah, 1, 2.
1:15.
Just a kind reminder that we're 11 post 6 already, and we're like through one case, so we just want to speed up some of the objections if possible.
Good morning, could you please introduce yourself to the court?
My name is Cody Diaz.
And what was your past occupation?
Well, I was Mr. Avery Bancroft's personal assistant.
And how did you begin working with Mr. Bancroft?
Well, when I was working as a security guard at a Cherry Bella that he was in attendance of, I overheard him talking to some people about how his former personal assistant had quit that same day. And so I kind of saw a chance and I talked to him, and at the end of the conversation I was hired.
And do you know Sarah Hobson?
Yeah, that's Adrian's child.
Okay. And what do you know about their relationship?
Oh, well, it was definitely fraught. I could hear them arguing, like, on speakerphone, I think, basically every single day.
Okay. And have you ever communicated with Sarah Hobson?
Yeah, we did talk over email.
And what did you email about?
Well, they had asked me about, they heard about the trip, and they said it sounded interesting, and they asked me for the details, so I sent them over.
Okay. Did they ever get back to you?
You know, they actually didn't, so I was really surprised when they actually just showed up on the train.
And working as Avery's assistant, what kind of access did you have to his personal documents?
Oh, like, full access. I had just completed a major financial audit. I had access to all of his spending, saving, his will, everything.
Let the record show that I'm approaching the witness and opposing counsel with Exhibit 6. Which I'm going to introduce the counsel. Now looking at that will, what would Taylor Hobson have to gain from her father's death?
Well, 95% of everything, which was, I believe, about $235 million.
Okay, thank you. Motion to approval. Now, on the Marina Express, April 24th, you had dinner with Avery Bancroft. What did you guys discuss? Objection to attorney testify? These questions are clearly leading. There's no truth of the matter here.
Just repeat the question.
Oh, repeat the question. What did they discuss at dinner with Bancroft? No statement has been said as to if it would be hearsay yet.
Response, Your Honor? She said you had dinner with Bancroft. What did you discuss? I just asked that the witness be allowed to testify whether or not she had dinner with Bancroft, not the attorney. Okay.
Well, I'll overrule for now. I think it's just natural transition, but just be careful.
Okay. So what did you guys discuss at dinner?
I think we talked about some. discuss anything of note, but I do remember that he and Taylor were arguing.
Now I'd like to talk to you about, Avery Bancroft's medallion. Are you familiar with the medallion?
Yes. We wear that every single day.
Okay. Permission to, show the witness and opposing counsel exhibit 17. Would you want to observe the copy? Has this changed from the last time you saw it?
No.
No. And what do you know about it?
Well, I know it was given to him by a loved one who had passed away. He never took it off. Like, I didn't see him wondering about it until the day he died.
You didn't see him wearing it the day he died?
No, I didn't.
Now, moving on to the night of the 24th. Were you working on anything? What were you working on?
Bancroft had actually asked me to do like a full financial audit of all the money he had ever spent on Taylor and how much money he could have made if he had invested it instead.
And where were you? Was anybody around when you were working on this?
You know, I actually did talk to Taylor while I was working.
And what did you discuss?
Well, Taylor asked me why I was up so late and what I was working on. Honestly, I was like too tired at that point, so I came up with like, I don't know, like an excuse to keep the matter private. So I just told her the truth that like her dad had asked me to do this audit of all the money that he had spent on her and how much he could have made instead. And she turned like pale and she just like left. I thought she would like have something to say about it, but she just like left.
Okay. And do you have any prior knowledge about plans of Avery's to change this will?
You know, every time they fought, he would say, you know, if I fight with her one more time, I'm gonna have to change it. And I would always offer to hire attorneys and like get that sort of thing because that was, you know, part of my job. But he'd always
Objection to
say,
hearsay, to specifically the statement Avery Bancroft made that the witness is testifying to?
The statement is a plan or motive, therefore would be an exception.
Do you have a rule number for that?
Eight oh three, number 3. So the defendant is simply saying that like Bancroft has, he's mentioned plans of changing his will by hand if he were to change it.
Bruce responds to the defense?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
The witness is saying that Avery Bancroft has said that he had planned to change the will by hand if he were ever to change the will.
That's
The
not,
plan.
this one? The witness did not say that. The witness said every time they fought, he said that he'd change it.
Oh.
I just asked if the witness be less vague, and if the witnesses testified to the will, it was not clear from their statement.
Could you repeat your testimony exactly what you said?
I'll try. Anytime that Bancroft and his wife fought, he'd always like complain that you know, if we fight one more time, I'm gonna have to change the will, and I would always offer to hire attorneys and get like that started because that was part of my job to handle financial matters. But he'd always say, you know, if I don't bother with the attorneys, like if I'm gonna change it, I'll change it by hand.
Now we can go back to when you were working on the audit. What did you do when you finished the audit?
Well, I went straight to Bancroft's cabin because he had gotten kind of mad at me earlier that day that I'd taken so long on him. So I went straight there to try to hand it over immediately because he was, you know, pretty antsy about them. And yeah.
Did you interact with Bancroft when you went to show them the audit?
I knocked on his door, and at first there was no answer, which I didn't find like concerning or anything because he took sleeping pills a lot to get trouble sleeping. So it wasn't initially concerning that there was no answer. But then I heard someone say from inside the room, "Get out," and it sounded exactly like when I had heard Taylor say "Get out" previously.
Okay.
And then the morning of the 25th, did you go to Bank Hopson?
Yes,
And what did you see when you
I saw him on the ground.
what was his state? Was he awake? Was
He was on the ground and he had a pulse, so I ran and I called for help, and so Dr. Edmond came and Alex Silva.
And, what then happened?
They tried to revive him for around a half hour and were ultimately unsuccessful.
And when the train arrived after Perth, what did you do?
Well, I arranged for his body to be transported back to Midlands, which neither of his children bothered to do. Like, at least Shannon had an excuse, she wasn't even there, but Taylor didn't offer to help at all.
Okay, and after, Avery's death, did you see Taylor Hobson again?
Yeah, I talked to them, a couple months later.
And did you see that medallion again?
Yeah, he was around her neck.
And what was your conversation you had with Taylor last time you saw them?
It was absurd. They were a completely different person. They did nothing but kind to me while I was working for their father, and it was like they were a different person. Like, a switch had flipped, and they fired me, and they said such horrible things about their father.
What did they say?
Well, they said the only decent thing he ever did was die.
No further questions. Ms. Young.
Good morning, Ms. Goodwill.
Good morning.
I'd like to talk a little bit about your time on the service. And more specifically, what happened after that. Your last conversation with Taylor Hobson, and what you didn't say. Now, you went to Bancroft Estates after the events at MRE, and you got fired.
Yeah.
By Taylor Hobson. And Ms. Goodwill, do you believe you deserve to be fired?
No.
Yeah, you worked at Bancroft Estates for a good amount of time.
Yeah.
And Mr. Bancroft, you looked up to him.
I did. He was like a father to me.
Yes, you confided in him.
Mhm.
And when you were just a temp working night shifts, he gave you a chance.
He did.
That's not a debt you can just repay so easily, is it?
I don't think so, but I hope that through my testimony today, I can make sure that I do what I can for him.
Yes, through your testimony, because Ms. Lilly, you were in subpoena.
I choose to offer this because I want to make sure that what is right happens regarding Mr. Bancroft.
What is right happens. Yes, you believe that your testimony today against Taylor Hobson will repay that debt to Avery Bancroft.
I believe that any testimony that I can offer to the best of my ability, whatever the outcome, I just want to make sure that the wrong person is not held accountable. I'm not totally sure who the wrong person is, but I just know what I know happened.
Okay, Ms. Lilly, well, let's move on to specifically your role as a personal assistant of Mr. Bancroft. Now, as the assistant, you oversaw his files, as you said, yes? And so you would be familiar with the lawsuit you filed against Ashley Connell, correct?
Yeah, and I also knew that he dropped it.
And Ms. Connell, you would recognize that lawsuit by Sheriff Tuesday.
Yeah.
Let the record reflect I'm approaching the witness opposing counsel with what has been deemed as exhibit concrete. Now, Ms. Doolittle, this is that lawsuit.
Yeah.
Hasn't been changed or altered in any way.
Not to my knowledge.
It's a fair and accurate copy.
I believe so.
At this moment, the defense would like to move exhibit 23 into evidence. Any questions? Now, please read quietly, loud and loud. It says, Bancroft Estates and Avery Bancroft is suing Ashley Connell. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, where?
Is this at the top?
Yes.
And if you turn to the back, again, please read quietly as I read aloud, it says, therefore, plaintiff respectfully requests as to all counts, judgment for general damages in favor of plaintiffs and against defendants in the amount of $1 billion. Did I read that correctly, Mr. Will?
Correct.
You can set that aside now, Mr. Will. And now, Mr. Little, you said that Avery Bancroft dropped the lawsuit, correct?
From what I know, or he was planning to before his death.
Okay. Well, Mr. Little, I'd like to move on to specifically the events on the show.
Yes.
April 21st. Now, you went to No Bowler Plain, correct?
Yes.
And you went to an Oasis with Dana Haskins and actually Bailey Connell.
Yeah.
And in a conversation about your boss, Mr. Bancroft, well, it got a little awkward, didn't it?
I'm not sure what you're referring to.
Well, let me remind you then, Mr. Little. In a conversation about Mr. Bancroft, Ashley Connell says, seriously, the world would be a better place without him.
Well, it's not shocking. A lot of people shared that view. They didn't know him. Like I knew him. They just knew what was said about him and what happened at the Black Bear Casino. And you know, businessmen are always gonna have enemies. Anyone powerful will. So I don't really know how that implicates her specifically. Like, there's probably a billion people that would think that about him.
Ms. Dool, I didn't ask what you think about the implications. I asked if she said that. Is it correct that she said that?
Yeah, but I don't think it's of note.
It's a yes or no question.
Yeah.
Okay. At this time, no further questions, Your Honor.
No, you're.
Yes, Your Honor. At this point, plaintiff calls Ms. Rory Shelton to the stand. Good morning, Ms. Shelton. Please, introduce yourself to the court.
Good morning. My name is Aurora Nightshade Shelton, also known by my legal name, Rory Shelton.
Ms. Shelton, what do you do for a living?
I am the mascot of the Melbourne Marsupials. They say laughter is the best medicine, so I do my best to cheer people up.
Alright. Now, how are you involved in today's case, Ms. Shelton?
I boarded the Mid-Riverina Express to attend one of our games.
Alright, can you tell us more about your time aboard the Express?
Yes, I ran into my best friend Taylor Hobson. By best, I mean only friend. They were avoiding me as usual, but I overheard an argument between them and Avery Bancroft.
What was this argument about?
During the welcome dinner, Taylor was complaining about someone called Shannon and how they didn't deserve a piece of the company.
Shit. Now, did you hear any other arguments between Bancroft and Hobson?
Yes, during the Null Arbor Plain stop.
What was this argument about?
Taylor was complaining that Bancroft was running the family business to the ground. Bancroft said, well, it's my money to burn. And Taylor said, for now.
Objection, Your Honor, to hearsay, specifically to Mr. Bancroft's statements. It's my money to burn.
Sorry, repeat that.
Yes, Your Honor. I'm objecting specifically to Mr. Bancroft's statement. It's my money to burn. It's an out-of-court statement being used for truth of the matter asserted, and therefore it's hearsay.
Yes, Your Honor. The plaintiff is not offering the statement for the truth of the matter asserted. We don't care whether or not it's Bancroft's money to burn. This is going more towards the effect on the listener, in this case Taylor Hobson, and giving context for Hobson's response.
Your Honor, if I may. An effect on listener has to be an action that is taken afterwards. A statement that's following another statement cannot be an effect on listener, because then entire conversations would get in on this rule. Effect on listener has to be an action, and again, the statement that follows the statement that I'm objecting to is not an action. Therefore, this statement cannot come in.
I'm gonna overrule, but prove the effect on the listener through your lines of questioning, and so witness as well, and feel free to raise your government if the witness cannot prove the effect.
Alright, now Ms. Shelton, now we ask the question. What was this argument at the Null Arbor Plain stop about?
Taylor was complaining that Bancroft was running family business to the ground. Bancroft said, well, it's my money to burn. Taylor said, for now. And then a few moments later, I saw Taylor stomp by. I decided to use my mascotting skills to offer them a brief distraction from their suffering.
Alright, how did you distract them, Michelle?
I took them on a walk to the crew cabin. I gave them my best performance as a mascot. They avoided me and started venting about something called the Black Bear Casino Fire Victims Fund. How predictable.
Alright,
Objection, Your Honor? To the witness's statement, how predictable?
Your Honor, I'm going to re-ask the question and ask that the witness, read that part. We do not believe that that is in any way relevant to, the statement made by the witness.
Yeah, briefly rephrase it to your left.
Ms. Shelton, was that the end of your conversation with Ms. Hobson?
No, Miss Hobson continued to follow me into the dining car and then the crew cabin. I showed them where I was sleeping, the floor, and then Taylor asked me about the master key. I told them that the master key could open any cabin in the platinum section and showed them where it was hanging. As Taylor was leaving, I saw them pick up something from the storage room. They were distracting me from my work, so.
Alright. What work were you working on, Ms. Shelton?
I was told to refresh the towels in all the cabins. I then went into cabin 3, Taylor's cabin, and I saw a box of rat poison in one of the bathroom drawers.
Did you see any rat poison in any of the other cabins in the platinum section that you refreshed?
No.
Alright. Now, did you see anything else while you were refreshing the towels?
Yes, when I went into cabin 1, Bancroft's cabin, I noticed a handwritten will sitting on Bancroft's desk. As I was reading it, as I was finishing reading the paper, Bancroft interrupted me and I left.
Alright. Did you ever see Bancroft again?
Yes, the next time I saw him, he was laying on the floor, dying. He had a purple pen in his hand, he was pointing to a lockbox, and he was muttering something like, must sign.
Objection, Your Honor, again, hearsay.
Yes, Your Honor. According to Midland's Rules of Evidence 8033, this is a then existing mental, emotional, and physical condition, namely an intent on the part of Bancroft.
Your Honor, there is a clear intent in this statement because Mr. Bancroft is not saying I must sign a specific document, and therefore the section to hearsay rule 8033 cannot be used.
I agree, I believe the plaintiff is entitled to his testimony towards, the content of his will, which, is not clear from the witness's testimony, and the foundation hasn't been laid as to how the witness know that, so I'm sustained.
Yes, Your Honor. Now, Ms. Shelton, did you ever happen to see the will again?
Yes, I saw a document in the trash can of cabin 1. I picked it up because it looked as pathetic as I felt, and later I pieced the document together, and I noticed that it was the handwritten will that I had seen in his cabin the day previous.
Would you recognize a copy of this will if I showed it to you?
Yes.
Your Honor, approaching opposing counsel and the witness in turn with what has previously been marked as Exhibit 8. Would Your Honor like a courtesy copy? Now, Ms. Shelton, can you read the, is this a fair and accurate copy of the will that you had seen?
Yes.
Has it been changed in any way since you last saw it?
No.
Okay. Can you read the second paragraph of that will?
I give the entirety of my estate, all 100% of it, to the Black Bear Casino Fire Victims Fund, Inc., a Midlands nonprofit.
Can you read the second to last paragraph?
Time is elapsed.
Oh, okay. But, let's check it. I'm sorry. There's a conversation, I'm pretty sure about that. Yeah.
Alright. Good morning. I'm just gonna ask you to do this. So first, you were talking a bit about rodenticide, and how you noticed Taylor Hobson shuffling around near the food cabin in your direct examination, correct?
Yes.
But just to be clear,
that was a public area, correct?
Yes.
And so every passenger on board, including you, had access to anything in that area, correct?
Yes.
Alright, Ms. Shelton. Now, I'd like to talk a bit about another passenger on the train that you know, and Miss Ashley Connell. Now, you knew Miss Connell before your time on the train, correct?
Yes, I modeled for her once.
And so, because you knew Miss Connell beforehand, you got lunch with her in Silver City.
Yes.
Now, when you were getting lunch with her in Silver City, you actually saw some text messages on her phone.
Yes, briefly, but I do not prefer to snoop other people's business.
Yes, but you would recognize those text messages if they were shown to you today, correct?
Yes.
Let the record reflect I'm approaching opposing counsel, Your Honor, and the witness in turn. The buttons will be pre-marked as exhibit 20. Your Honor, on the courtesy copy. Thank you, Ms. Shelton. Now, Ms. Shelton, these are the text messages that you saw on Ashley Connell's phone, correct?
I believe I only saw a few of these messages, but I didn't read them in detail.
Yes, but you saw all of these messages except for this last one on the back that says Wednesday, April 24th, correct?
Yes.
Alright. And these haven't been changed or altered in any way since the last time that you saw them?
I don't believe so.
Alright, Ms. Shelton. Now, read along silently. Oh, I apologize. Defense moves to enter exhibit 28 into evidence.
Objection? Objection, Your Honor, as to hearsay.
Can you elaborate on your objection?
Yes, Your Honor, as to the statements, as to the cases within hearsay of, the entirety of the phone messages and timings.
Are you objecting to the entirety of the exhibit or to specific lines?
To specifically the dates and, the name of the sender and the time on the phone.
Your Honor, if I may. Defense is open to constructively redacting all of the messages sent by Ashley Connell. However, we do feel that the messages made by Shannon Shahid, as well as the name Shannon Shahid, are very important. The name Shannon Shahid is very important in establishing the fact that the sender of these messages was Ms. Shannon Shahid, the opposing party, and then under opposing party's statement, all of Shannon Shahid's messages are covered.
Has it been established that this is Shannon Shahid, that this is her phone number this is coming from?
Yes, under case law Ginger v. Heisman, if you'd like to flip to case law tab in the light blue. Yeah, so Ginger v. Heisman just ensures that by preponderance of the evidence, if the name on a text message or phone call says that it's from that sender, that's enough to establish that it was in fact from that sender.
Okay, again, you have leeway on cross. I am going to overrule the objection and allow the exhibit to, but feel free to constructively redact as needed for your sake.
Yes, Your Honor. So we can constructively redact all of Ashley Connell's messages, including the last one that the witness has testified they haven't seen. Alright, Ms. Johnson. So now, let's get back to reading through these messages. So please read along silently as I read aloud, okay? First, Ms. Shannon Shahid says, I'm sorry about the lawsuit. Is that correct?
Yes.
And then later on, Ms. Shahid says, they don't know what's going to happen. First, they see you broke, living in your car. But then they see a different outcome. Bancroft gone, and the lawsuit gone. Did I read that correctly?
Yes, I'm also well acquainted with being broke, sad, and homeless.
Alright, Ms. Shelton, just beneath that text message, she sends another one. She says, there'll come a time when you and Bancroft cross paths. Contact me, and the spirits will guide you. Did I read that correctly?
Yes.
Alright, we can set that aside. And now Ms. Shelton, during that call or during that lunch that you had with Ashley Connell, she also received a phone call, correct?
Yes.
And you later saw, when you were using her phone, that that phone call was from a Miss Shannon Shahid, correct?
Yes.
Same Shannon Shahid who sent those text messages.
They have the same name.
Alright, then, Ms. Shelton, you were able to hear this phone call.
Yes.
And you heard the person on the other line, Shannon Shahid, saying, save the pleasantries, Connell. I'm calling to check in on that favor that you owe me. If Bancroft is planning a change, I need you to take care of it. That's what you heard the person on the other end of the line say, correct?
Yes.
Alright. Thank you, Ms. Shelton. At this time, defense has no further questions.
No, redirect, Your Honor, we just asked that the witness be like.
Now you may start.
No, Your Honor. This time the plaintiff would like to rest their case in chief.
Timekeepers, do we have time for a recess? I know we're gonna run up on all laws, because this case is long, so do we have time or should we just keep it moving?
We can do like 5 to 7
Yeah,
minutes.
5.
Because it's we have 100 minutes till all lost and there's 70 minutes of trial stuff left. So.
That's fine, 5 minutes.
It just says I bumped into I just say that I saw it. 1416. Alright, do you recall passages of the check cross? I have it at this 512. 511. 512. It just says yes. It just says autopsy.
I'm not gonna do it, but I'm just gonna calculate this on how much time I'm still on the board, but it's not really shuffles like. Yeah.
Just ask the questions and I'll just I'm just like, I'm trying to know if everything that's coming out during the process, yes, to make it better.
Just run that. I'll go from there. I missed the last time I spoke with your father. What happened?
I love that.
Yes, Your Honor.
Sorry, I'm afraid, just put my name. But, is the defense ready to present their presentation?
Yes, Your Honor. The defense calls Taylor Hopkins to the stand. Good morning, Taylor. Can you introduce yourself?
Good morning. I'm Taylor Hobson. Avery Bancroft is my dad.
And what do you do for a living?
Well, I work with a lot of volunteer work and nonprofits, but currently I'm interim CEO of Big Rock Estate.
Do you know why you're here today?
Well, yeah. Shannon Shahid, the plaintiff, is suing me. She thinks it had something to do with my dad's death.
Well, how do you know the plaintiff?
She's my sister. Well, half-sister. We have the same dad, but different moms.
Did the two of you grow up together?
Not really. Growing up, it was really just my mom and I. But Shannon and I went to the same middle school and high school, so I saw her around sometimes.
What was your relationship like?
She's just like a little sister, you know? We had our ups and downs. But after I left for college, we grew distant, and things kind of fell apart after that.
What about your father? What was your relationship like with him?
We didn't really have one. Growing up again, it was just my mom and I, and he wasn't really in the picture.
Did you ever end up speaking to your father?
Yeah. I reached out to him when my mom was going through cancer treatment. She needed money and for an experimental treatment.
Did she get that treatment?
She did. She got money for it somehow, and she was able to be cancer free for a couple of years.
Did you ever speak with him again?
I did. A couple times, yeah. And he took me into the family business.
When you say family business, do you mean Bancroft Estates?
That's right. That was his company.
Well, did you and the plaintiff work at Bancroft Estates?
We were supposed to. Well, I worked at Bancroft Estates. My dad told me, come work for Bancroft Estates, come earn your living. But the only time I ever saw Shannon there was to ask for money.
How would your father respond to her ask?
At first, he would give her the money. But after countless times, he finally said no.
When was the last time the plaintiff asked your father for money?
That would be last summer, in 2023.
Can you explain what happened?
Yeah. My dad invited me, my fiance Kelly, and Shannon to his villa. The dinner started off great, but then Shannon started talking about her failing psychic business, and she said she needed $20 million in fast.
$20 million? How did your father respond to that ask?
He laughed in her face. He said, come work for Bancroft Estates. But she said, screw Bancroft Estates. I don't want anything to do with you or your stupid company.
Did she say anything else to your father?
Yeah. She said, next time, spare the invite, Avery. The only event of yours I'll ever go to is your funeral.
And after you heard the plaintiff tell your father the only event of yours I'll ever go to is your funeral, did you ever see the two of them speak again?
No.
Now I want to talk about the train ride. Why were you on the Mid Riverina Express?
Well, Kelly wanted to get away from work for a bit, and I'd heard about the MRE, and so I decided to book some tickets.
Did you speak to your father in the train?
I did. A few times. I didn't know it'd be my last.
I want to talk about your last conversation with him. When was that?
That was the day before he died.
Can you explain what happened?
Yeah. We were arguing about something stupid now that I look back at it, but he was telling me to come work at Bancroft Estates. But I told him no. I was already dedicating so much time to that and not enough time to my nonprofit work that I couldn't spare the time.
What happened after that?
Well, after things got heated, I left the cabin, but I heard some stumbling in the cabin next door.
Stumbling, do you know what that was?
Yeah, the door was slightly opened and I looked inside and Rory Shelton was stumbling around, holding a flask in one hand and a box in the other. I couldn't really tell what the box was.
Now I want to get this right. What cabin were you in?
That was cabin 2, Ashley Connell's cabin.
Well, Taylor, do you know where Ashley Connell was at that time?
Yeah. Well, I went back to my dad's cabin after a bit and I wanted to reconcile some things with him. But when I went in, Ashley Connell was there. She was telling him to drop the suit.
Drop the suit. Do you know what she meant?
Yeah. Ashley was in a $1 billion defamation suit with my dad. And she wanted to get rid of that.
How did your father react when you came in the room?
When I came in, he was already mid-argument with Ashley Connell, and he just spared me a glance, but he ripped off his medallion and gave it to me. My dad was weird sometimes, but I wasn't sure if he was trying to reconcile things with me, and so I took it.
What happened after that, Taylor?
Well, after that, I left the room, and I went to sleep.
Around what time did you go to sleep?
Around 11 p.m.
And at any point in the night, did you leave your cabin?
No, I went straight to sleep. It had been a long day.
What happened when you woke up that next morning?
Well, the next morning when I woke up to screams. I looked outside my cabin and people were flooding my dad's cabin, so I followed the people. There's one person standing over him, one person flashing a camera in my face, and then before I knew it, he was dead.
I'm very sorry, but I need to talk to you about what happened after that. The police, did they question you?
They did.
Did they? And after they questioned you, did they detain you?
No.
Did they arrest you?
No.
Taylor, did you have anything to do with your father's death?
No, of course not. We had our ups and downs, but he was my dad.
And when you returned home to the police, what happened?
I decided it was best to update the shareholders personally. So I went to Bancroft Estates, and I actually saw Shannon there.
What did you two talk about?
Well, I told her I seen our dad die in front of me.
How did the plaintiff respond?
She didn't. She didn't cry, she didn't get mad. All she said was, when am I getting my inheritance?
When am I getting my inheritance? How did you respond?
I was mad. I couldn't believe that after everything I told her, she was asking about money. I told her to leave.
Did she?
No, she kept trying to argue with me about getting her money. Eventually, I had to ask security to escort her out.
Did the plaintiff say anything to you as she was escorted out?
Yeah. She said, it's not your money to keep from me. You'll get what's coming for you.
No further questions, Your Honor.
you're Avery Bancroft's child, correct?
I am. I'm a starter.
However, Mr. Bancroft never interacted with you much during your childhood, did you?
I'm sorry?
You didn't interact with Mr. Bancroft during your childhood, did you?
No, I kept my distance. My mom always respected him and wanted to respect his marriage.
You would say that the people who raised you were your mom and your stepdad, wouldn't you?
For the most part, but it was really just my mom and I.
Not Avery Bancroft.
No, again, he wasn't part of my childhood.
Later, your mom was diagnosed with cancer, wasn't she?
She was. It was pretty bad.
And for her treatment, you needed quite a bit of money, didn't you?
I did. The doctor said there was some experimental treatment that she could have, but that required a lot of money, and I was a college student. My stepdad was laid off, and so I needed some money.
And to get this money, you tried to reach out to Mr. Bancroft, didn't you?
I did.
But he never responded.
No, he didn't, but my mom got the money somehow.
Now, after this, you didn't interact with Bancroft for a while, correct?
No, I didn't.
In fact, it wasn't until 2011 that you reached out to him again.
2011?
Yes, sir.
I reached out to him after my mom died.
And this is because at this point you're drowning in debt, weren't you?
I was a college student. I had college debts to pay off, my mom's medical bills to pay off, and I needed some money.
So, in response, Mr. Bancroft began sending you $50,000 a month, didn't he?
He gave me a stipend of $50,000. I think he felt bad about not being part of my childhood.
And at first you used this money to pay off your debts.
I did, yes.
But then you decided you're going to use this money to enjoy the finer things in life.
That's right. I realized after losing my mom so young, you only live once.
And you didn't put any of this money towards the nonprofits you're working on?
No.
Instead, you chose to spend it on 5 cars.
I have a lot of business to do, and I need cars for that.
So, you bought 1 Porsche, 2 Rolls Royces, 2 Ferraris, 1 Mercedes, and 1 Rolls Royce.
That's true.
Ms. Hobson, is something funny to you about your father's death?
Objection, Your Honor. I ask that statement be stricken from the record.
I don't think the cars have anything to do with my dad's death.
I'll move on.
Yeah.
Yeah. Ms. Hobson, do you need a pen to compose yourself? Your Honor, can the time be paused on the cross-examination?
Pause for 5 seconds.
Okay, now, you also hired a private chef with this $50,000 a month, correct?
I did. I have a lot of allergies and a lot of food restrictions that I need to follow.
And with this $50,000, you chose to spend $10,000 a month on wine, didn't you?
I did. I believe wines are an investment.
And all of this wine was for yourself? You enjoyed it?
I did, but I gifted them out as well.
But they were primarily for yourself.
Again, they're an investment.
Now, Ms. Hobson, at some point in April 2023, Mr. Bancroft stopped sending you his stipends, didn't he?
He did. I worked as proxy to his company, and then when I started working more on my nonprofit work, that's when he seemed to cut it off.
But you wanted to continue living your lavish lifestyle, didn't you?
I figured it was a temporary setback, and so I did.
So you took out a loan for $600,000, correct?
That's true.
But you don't earn any income with your nonprofit work, right?
Yes, they're nonprofit, and so I don't earn any income.
And your partner, Kelly Dews, doesn't earn any income either, right?
I mean, that's for Kelly to know.
But you weren't getting any money from.
Well, not from Kelly, no.
And you have no assets of your own.
Assets of my own?
You don't have anything you could use as collateral for this loan.
Well, not anything worth any loan. So I didn't have, the houses were in Bancroft's name.
So you were unable to pay back this $600,000 loan, correct?
Well, that's true.
So you got an extension,
I did.
and then you got another extension.
Well, the second extension was when my dad died. A lot was going on during that time, and I needed the extension because I was preoccupied with other things.
So now you owe a total of $2.4 million for that loan.
That's true, but the terms were steep on that loan.
Now, Ms. Hobson, I'd like to talk to you about your involvement with Bancroft Estates. You said you worked under Mr. Bancroft,
I did, I was his proxy.
but you disagreed with a lot of Mr. Bancroft's business practices, didn't you?
There were a few things I disagreed with, primarily with deforestation efforts. A lot of nonprofits I work with focus on those deforestations, and so I didn't agree with those.
You would describe his business practices as antiquated, ineffective, and terrible.
Not holistically, but when it came to those things, yes.
Well, you felt that Avery Bancroft was running your family business into the ground.
Again, I'm very passionate about my environmental efforts, and I was upset that he was engaging in deforestation practices.
Your Honor, at this time, let the record reflect that I am now approaching the witness to what has previously been marked as Exhibit 6. Ms. Hobson.
Your Honor, I ask that opposing counsel show me the document he handed to me.
Just this page. Your Honor, Exhibit 6 has already been admitted evidence and referred to in this trial. Ms. Hobson, you recognize this as your father's will, correct?
This is.
And you understand that in this will, you would be receiving 95% of his entire estate, right?
That's true.
So that means you would be receiving over $200 million post-tax.
Post-tax? Yes.
And you would also be receiving control of Bancroft Estates.
That's true. I was already working as a proxy to his company, and so it only made sense for him to come.
So with this inheritance, you could pay off your loan, couldn't you?
The loan? Yes.
And you could change Bancroft Estates' business practices.
Well, as proxy, I was already trying to get him to change it, and that's correct.
So as proxy, you are unable to change the business practices.
Well, I was trying to help him make changes to his practices.
But once you inherited this business, you can make the changes yourself, couldn't you?
Well, not myself. Again, there's a board of shareholders, and so I have to consult with them as well.
You can set that aside now. Now, Ms. Hobson, I'd like to talk to you about your experiences before the River Express. You interacted with Mr. Bancroft several times while you were on board, correct?
I did. He's my dad.
And in many of these interactions, you often argued with Bancroft.
That's true. We talked a lot about business. He was very much of a businessman and liked to talk about that a lot. But that was often the topics of our arguments as well.
And one frequent topic of your argument was Bancroft's will, wasn't it?
It was.
You wanted to cut Shannon Kate out of this will, didn't you?
I told him that I didn't think that Shannon deserved a part in the company.
You wanted to receive all of Bancroft's estate.
All I said was I didn't think that Shannon deserved a part. Again, as I mentioned, anytime I saw her, she was simply asking for money, and she wasn't working at Bancroft Estates. So I didn't think she needed a part in the company.
Now, after one of these arguments, you saw Mr. Bancroft pull out a legal pad and a purple pen, correct?
That's true.
And then you saw them write something down, didn't you?
I did seem right.
Your Honor, at this time, let the record reflect on opposing counsel and the witness in chair with what is previously marked as Exhibit 8. We will not be eliciting a specific statement in this examination. Would Your Honor, I'll be courtesy talk to you, or do you already talk? Ms. Hobson, this is what you saw your father write, isn't it?
This is.
And under this new will, you understood that you would be receiving none of Mr. Bancroft's inheritance, correct?
That's true.
And you didn't like this change, did you?
I'm sorry?
You didn't like this change in the will?
I didn't agree with it, no.
You felt Mr. Bancroft was being selfish by not allowing you to take part in his inheritance.
I believe that I did deserve at least some part of his inheritance.
You felt like you were being forsaken by Mr. Bancroft.
That's true.
You can set that aside. Now, Ms. Hobson, you were also aware that there is rat poison on the Mid-River Express, correct?
I heard it was in the storage area. Correct.
You knew it was in the storage room, didn't you?
Well, yes, they made us aware of that.
Just
They
to be
made
clear.
everyone aware of that.
But you didn't see any other passengers with rat poison while you were on board?
I'm not holding it, no.
Now, Ms. Hobson, I'd like to move on to what happened after your father's death. If you ever need a moment, I know it's going to be tough to talk about, but if you ever need a moment, feel free to take your time. You didn't attend your father's funeral, did you?
I couldn't. No. Shannon was already making such a big deal about who she wanted invited and what she wanted done with the funeral. I didn't want to cause a scene there, and so I decided to stay home.
Well, just to be clear, you weren't staying home, were you?
No, actually. I just decided not to go to the funeral.
You decided you would rather be shopping for a private jet than staying home, correct?
I needed to hit the ground running with the business, and so I decided to start.
And by hit the ground running, you mean you wanted to buy a private jet for personal use?
Well, actually, my dad and I, we used to, when he took me into the family business, we used to talk about planes all the time. He traveled a lot for work, and so we always talked about his dream plane, and when he died, I realized maybe it's time to get one.
But you could have attended Bancroft's funeral, couldn't you?
Well, yes, but no. I didn't want to cause a scene, and I figured by staying away and not causing a fight with Shannon at his funeral is the best I can do for him.
Now, Ms. Hobson, I'd like to ask you about some things you said during your direct examination just a few moments ago. I believe you stated that when you saw Bancroft dying in the cabin, you remember seeing people taking pictures, right?
That's true.
And you paid to have rights to these pictures, didn't you?
That's true. They were taking pictures of my dad's dead body. Why would I want those out with other people?
But you never offered pictures of the scene to the police, did you?
My dad was dying. That wasn't a concern to me. What was concerning to me was people were taking pictures of me and my dad dead on the floor.
But you deleted these pictures, didn't you?
Yes, again, I didn't want some random stranger on the train having pictures of my dead dad.
Your Honor, no further.
No, Your Honor.
Would you call the next witness?
Yes, Your Honor. At this time, defense calls Dr. Dana Haskins to stand. Good morning, Doctor. Can you please introduce yourself to the court?
Hi, my name is Dr. Dana Haskins.
And Dr. Haskins, what do you do for a living?
I'm a licensed psychologist and I'm a family therapist.
Do you have an educational background?
I do. I received my PhD in clinical psychology from Midland State University.
And any relevant work experience?
For 19 years, I was the resident psychologist at Polk County. I transitioned from that into a private practice that I now own, and I'm a family therapist.
And Dr. Haskins, why are you joining us today?
Well, I conducted a psychological examination of Taylor Hobson, and I'm here to talk about those results today.
Did you use a method when you were conducting your examination?
I did. I conducted 3 tests as per the Midland State Psychology Board, and I also conducted a general interview.
And is this method standard in your field?
It is.
And Dr. Haskins, did you rely on any facts and data when you were using your method?
As I alluded to, I used the findings from those 3 tests as well as a general interview in order to reach my result.
And Dr. Haskins, did you reliably apply the methods to the facts and data of this case?
As always.
So, Dr. Haskins, was all of that information sufficient to come to your conclusion?
It was.
And what exactly is your conclusion, Doctor?
Based off of my expertise, I found that Taylor Hobson does not fit the psychological profile of an intentional killer.
Alright, Dr. Haskins, we'll get into your conclusions and your tests in a second, but first, I'd like to ask, was there anything unique about your examination of Taylor Hobson?
It was considered unusual, but not unheard of, in the case that I had met Taylor Hobson, the patient that I was examining, prior to the examination.
Now, Dr. Haskins, did you take any measures to ensure that your test would be accurate?
Absolutely. To ensure that there was no conflict of interest, I had an independent advisory board by the Midlands Board of Psychology to ensure that I was cleared to do this examination, which I was.
Alright, Doctor. Now let's actually get into those tests that you conducted, starting with the Midlands MPI. Can you briefly just describe that test for the jury?
Absolutely. So the first test I conducted was the Midlands MPI, which stands for Multiphasic Personality Inventory. Now this test, it consists of 40 true or false questions.
And what does this examination test for?
So there's 5 categories. These categories consist of aggressiveness, antisocial behavior, self-importance, shyness, and disconstraint. Now, if 2 categories are considered in elevated levels, there is a concern for aggressive behavior. This excludes shyness.
And Dr. Haskins, how did Ms. Hobson score on this exam?
Barring shyness, the Taylor Hobson did not show elevated levels in any of the 5 categories.
So, Dr. Haskins, what does Ms. Hobson's score indicate?
As a psychologist, because there were no categories that showed elevated levels, I found that the defendant did not have the psychological profile of the killer. In this case, they lacked 2 of the important factors of a psychological killer, which is antisocial behavior and feelings of self-importance.
Alright, Doctor. Now let's move on to that second test that you talked about, the CISB. Can you explain that test for the jury?
Absolutely. So the second test I conducted was the CISB test. The CISB stands for Chambliss Incomplete Sentences Blank. Now, as the name implies, this test consists of 20 fill-in-the-blank questions in which the patient will respond to prompts.
And what does the CISB test for?
It tests for what we call maladjustment. Now, maladjustment essentially means it evaluates how capable a person is to adjust to their environments.
And how did Ms. Hobson score on this exam?
So scores that fall between 50 and 70 are considered not maladjusted. In this case, Taylor Hobson scored between that category, and because of that, she's considered not maladjusted.
So, again, Doctor, what does Ms. Hobson's score indicate?
So again, maladjustment is a hallmark of an intentional killer. Because Taylor Hobson was not found to be maladjusted, I found this test indicated that she was not an intentional killer.
Alright, Doctor. Now let's move on to your third examination, the TAT test. Can you please explain that test for the jury?
Absolutely. So the final test I conducted was the thematic apperception test. Now this test, the examiner in this case, provides a set of scene cards to the patient in which the patient will provide a story detailing their recounting of the events within the card.
And Doctor, how did Ms. Hobson score on that examination?
Well, the thematic apperception test is interesting because it provides a third-person perspective on how the patient is feeling. In this case, it indicated that the Taylor Hobson has a very complex relationship with their father, but it didn't warrant any concern just based off of the previous test that I conducted.
Alright, Doctor. And you mentioned that you conducted a general interview. Can you please tell us a bit about how Ms. Hobson looked or how you perceived her when you first conducted this interview?
So, in my general interview, we did touch on some pretty sensitive topics, namely her father's death. At certain points, she did get very visibly emotional, and there were tears at certain points in time. She very heartily expressed her desire at certain points that she regretted certain things she had said to her father, and she wished she could take them back.
Alright, Doctor. And again, what does this indicate about Ms. Hobson?
Well, this general interview, it indicated that she had a genuine sense of empathy, and this was something that intentional killers cannot have. In this case, Taylor Hobson showed that she had genuine empathy for the death of her father, and because of that, I ruled out her possibility of being an intentional killer.
So, Doctor, once again, was all of this information sufficient to come to your conclusion?
Absolutely. Each one of these tests indicated a specific hallmark of an intentional killer, and it proved that that hallmark was not present in Taylor Hobson.
And doctor, once again, what is your conclusion?
In this case, I don't believe that Taylor Hobson was in the psychological state of an intentional killer.
Alright, thank you, Dr. Haskins. This time defense has no further questions.
Good morning, Dr. Haskins.
Good afternoon.
I'm just gonna be asking you a few questions for today. First, let's start off with something you had mentioned on Interact. You mentioned that it was unusual that you were socially acquainted with the defendant before giving the assessment, correct?
Exactly. That's why I'm sure there was no conflict of interest with the Midland Board of Psychologists.
Okay. You in fact offered to take Hobson on as a regular client before performing the assessments, correct?
That is correct.
Alright. Now, as to the specific tests, you performed 3 tests,
That's correct.
and most psychologists you know perform between 5 to 6 tests. Isn't that right?
That's true. I would like to clarify, however, that 3 is considered standard.
Alright. But you would concede that more tests could yield more accurate results, correct?
You're talking about very small margins here. 3 tests already prove a significant level of accuracy.
Alright. Now, Dr. Hoskins, let's talk about the specific testing question. Let's start off with the CIS, with the Midlands NPI. These are the true or false questions, correct?
That's correct.
And these base the psychological status of the patient in question.
That's true.
Now, these tests can, you would agree that prior knowledge of questions on these tests can lead to manipulation of the results.
Yes and no. While prior knowledge would potentially affect the results, there are many factors in place to prevent manipulation by a patient.
Right. And you would agree that some of these tests have been released for educational purposes.
That's true.
Right. Now, you would say that, barring shyness, the defendant had almost textbook perfect responses to these questions. Isn't that right?
Actually, that's not true because shyness would not indicate a textbook result. In this case, as I mentioned before, high levels of shyness actually go against manipulation because in this case, Taylor Hobson exhibited high levels of shyness in her score that actually counts against manipulation. It's one of the factors we use to prevent manipulation.
Right. But every other section on the test was almost textbook perfect.
That's right, but shyness is a very important factor to consider. It is one of the 5 categories.
Right. Now let's move on to your second test, the CISD. Now, these are testing for word associations.
That's correct.
And high scores on the tests indicate maladjustment.
That's correct.
And the defendant scored just 1 point away from maladjustment on this test, correct?
It's very easy to consider 1 point to be very close. However, I would like to emphasize the scoring critique in this case. Now, scores from 0 to 2 indicate that a person is not maladjusted. A score of 3 indicates a neutral state, and anything above 3 indicates a level of maladjustment. I would like to emphasize that there is a significant discrepancy between a person who scores neutral on a response and a person who scores 4 or higher. Now, because of that, it's important to consider that this is just one isolated result, and even just one answer that would be considered neutral to maladjusted is a significant consideration to make.
Alright. Let's move on to your last test, Dr. Hoskins, the TAT. Now, this is the test where you look at different cards and ask your patient to respond to these cards.
That is correct.
And normally, you include recording a patient as part of this process, correct?
I do not require it by any means, though.
But you agree that this can play a big part in your assessment.
I'm able to complete my evaluation of the TAT test perfectly without the recording.
Alright. Now, I'm going to be talking more about one specific card. Now, Dr. Hoskins, you're familiar with the cards you use in performing your assessments?
I would be, yes.
Your Honor, at this moment,